We're here today to talk about the rapid expansion of fentanyl in the state of Texas, as well as even in southeast Texas. Before I get into all the details, we have a room filled with local and regional law enforcement, and I want to give them the chance to tell you all who they are, what their name is, and what jurisdiction they represent. And we'll just start here to my left.
Jim Singletary, I'm the Chief of Police of the Beaumont Police Department.
Randy Weber, I'm the Congressman for District 14.
Mark Davis, I'm the Sheriff in Hardin County.
Barron Burleson, Police Chief of Sour Lake.
Keith Gilman, the incoming Jefferson County District Attorney's Office.
Mark Dubose, Chief Deputy, Orange County Sheriff's Office.
John Leger, Chief Deputy of Jefferson County Sheriff's Office.
Eric Carr Serrano, I'm with the Chambers County District Attorney's Office.
Steve McCrum with the Texas Department of Public Safety.
Fentanyl is something that's infiltrating the entire state of Texas. In order for Texas to be able to deal with it the way that we need to, it requires collaboration at all levels of government, state, local, federal. We need to all realize that fentanyl is killing Texans. Last year, almost 1,700 Texans lost their lives because of fentanyl. Fentanyl is the #1 killer in the United States of America in the population group between 18 and 45. The DEA administrator said that fentanyl is the single deadliest threat that our nation has ever faced. According to the CDC, during the one-year time period from February of 2021 to February of 2022, more than 75,000 Americans died from fentanyl-related overdoses. Fentanyl, the precursor elements of it typically are made by Chinese-based companies, and then they provide those to Mexican drug cartels, who will then lace those elements onto other different types of drugs. Drugs that seem like they're valid prescription drugs, things like painkillers, stimulants, or anti-anxiety drugs. But worse than all of that is what's called rainbow fentanyl. Rainbow fentanyl is multicolored. It looks like pieces of candy, and it is attractive to young children who innocently have no clue that a piece of candy that they may be picking up and putting into their mouth actually is laced with deadly fentanyl. All of this is a byproduct of Biden's open border policies that led to about 2.2 million people being apprehended coming across the border in just this past year. When you have that many people coming across the border with the assistance of Mexican drug cartels, it makes it far easier for a greater volume of fentanyl to be crossing our border, infiltrating our state as well as our entire country. And this fentanyl is destroying families in record numbers. 4 Hayes School District teens recently lost their lives because of fentanyl. A 13-year-old boy lost his life because of fentanyl. I met with Virginia Krieger, whose daughter tragically died because of fentanyl poisoning. Well, Texas, as a state, we're stepping up and taking action to respond to this. In the past year, just Texas law enforcement alone has seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the entire United States of America. Fentanyl truly is a clandestine killer caused by Mexican drug cartels. Cartels are terrorists, and it's time that we started treating them that way. So I issued an executive order designating cartels as terrorist organizations and requesting the Texas Department of Public Safety to take immediate action. And what DPS is doing, they are working with their local and federal partners to identify Texas gangs that support these Mexican drug cartels, to seize any assets they can find, especially assets of the Mexican drug cartels, and to do whatever they can to disrupt cartel networks. I also sent a letter to President Biden as well as Vice President Harris demanding that they classify Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations. That would in turn trigger a federal statute that would provide a robust response by the federal government to shut down the importation of fentanyl into the United States. I also signed a law to increase criminal penalties for either making or distributing fentanyl. But we realize with the magnitude of the problem that we're dealing with that more must be done. So I'm proposing new laws this coming session. One would classify fentanyl as a poisoning as opposed to an overdose, which is what happens to some other drugs. The reason for that is because, as I mentioned earlier, fentanyl is laced onto other drugs that people have no idea that the fentanyl is on there. And when they take just that one drug, they lose their life, not because they're taking an overdose, but because it is laced with fentanyl. Also, I will be seeking a law that will make it a murder charge to knowingly provide fentanyl-laced drugs that kill someone. And then something we must achieve, and that is that there actually is a medical antidote that can quickly revive someone who does unwittingly either take fentanyl or expose themselves to fentanyl. It's called Narcan. And we must make Narcan far more readily available. Definitely to law enforcement officers, some of whom have encountered fentanyl and had a very severe adverse reaction, and they were saved solely by taking Narcan. But we also need Narcan in our schools, in some workplaces, and other areas where drugs like this may be readily available. We also, as a state and as local communities, we must do a better job of communicating with parents, with families, with communities about the dangers that exist. And that's why today we are launching the One Pill Kills campaign to let parents, to let families, to let communities know one single pill that has fentanyl laced onto it is a deadly dose that can kill anybody who takes it. And that person may have no idea that the pill they're taking is laced with fentanyl. So we wanted to remind our fellow Texans that just one pill with fentanyl is enough to kill you. And working together by raising the alarm, especially with regard to this rainbow-colored pill that kids may expose themselves to. We want to protect those lives by letting parents know what's going on. Next, I want to have the Beaumont Police Chief, Jim Singletary, share his thoughts.
What's really horribly concerning to us is that right now we don't have a major problem with fentanyl compared to the rest of the state. But in 2019, we had 9 cases. 2019 and 2021, we had 56 cases. Our local lab, it's going to be well over 100 now, and we're very concerned about that. And well, we really appreciate your effort here to doing this. It's something that we've needed, and along with educating like you've done, that's the best thing in the world for us. That's what we need more than anything. Let me add this. We had 65 overdoses in Jefferson County in 2021. 25 of them were was fentanyl. Again, it's going to be well over 150 in 22. Is what we project. So it's coming to Southeast Texas, and we got to do something about it.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. And now, Director McCraw.
Thank you, Governor. I think it's been well said, and the Governor made a point of noting that the most illicit drug threat that certainly I've experienced, I know the Chief's experienced in our lifetime, is fentanyl. And for a number of reasons, because one, it's so potent, it's 100 times as potent as morphine, but it only takes 2 milligrams as a lethal dose. More importantly, it's the Mexican cartels and what they've done with it, and the Governor's noted it. It's poisoning. This is a deliberate attempt to increase their market share, and they're doing it under the guise of pills, whether it's Oxycontin, oxycodone, Percocet, Adderall, Xanax, you name it, it doesn't matter. And now Skittles look alike, okay? Because they're trying to increase their marketplace. They don't care if someone dies as a result of it or consequence of it. They don't care if they're poisoned, because it's not as the Governor said, it's not an overdose. It's a poisoning, because they think they're getting something they're not, and they're dying from it. And I do applaud you, Governor, for enlisting the media and the public's attention to be able to educate, because the most important thing we can do is inoculate our kids and our youth from taking that one pill that kills. I also, moreover, hey, back in this is something that you've been leading on the forefront. Back in March of 2021, we talked about it in detail. You're concerned when there's a global mass migration event that takes Border Patrol off the river and into processing and detention. The net result at that is it's less safe and, of course, more fentanyl. And we've seen, what, 17, just DPS alone, over just DPS, 342 million lethal doses of fentanyl. 17.5 tons of methamphetamine that the chief talked about earlier is also continued concern. And the cartels haven't finished yet. And so, you know, naming them for what they are, terrorists, is putting a face on what they are in terms of the impact of the United States, I think was important. And Governor, thank you again.
Thank you. We'll take a few questions.
Governor, you talked a lot about the Mexican cartels and the executive order to try to slow it from coming into Texas, but what about once it's in Texas? What are you doing to combat gangs and the distributors in Texas?
A lot. And so I'll answer this in part, then turn it over to Director McCraw, because one thing that we have done is to create anti-gang centers across the state of Texas, and then increase those number of anti-gang centers. And those anti-gang centers work in collaboration with local, state, and federal law enforcement. So they focus primarily, if not only, on identifying these gangs, tracking them down, disrupting their operations, and arresting and prosecuting them. And so they do this comprehensively across the state of Texas. But I'll let you add more to it.
I mean, well, the governor's Texas Anti-Gang Initiative has been very productive, because what it does, it takes local, state, and federal agencies and puts them collaboratively in one location. Border Prosecutors Unit, so we got additional prosecutor resources in it to be able to target those organizations that constitute the most significant threat and have impactful as it relates to violence in the community, and that's the gangs. And certainly we have one in Houston in that regard. I know if you proliferate them around the state. We have them in McAllen. There's one in Waco, North Texas, and of course you continue to increase these areas. And the advantage is we can collaboratively target, and there's every agency has information about a particular gang. And so to the extent that we can work together and cooperatively, you've prioritized in the past, you know, serial robbery crews and other things, and now you're prioritizing fentanyl, because we know that the gangs at the retail distribution of the Mexican cartels, where the rubber meets the road, it's the gangs that are doing it. And whether it's Tango Blast, you know, to the Texas Syndicate, Texas Mexican Mafia, all those organizations are involved in it at this point in time.
To go back and be clear, the gangs operating in Texas, they are operating in conjunction with the Mexican drug cartels. And with my recent executive order, we are to crack down not just on the drug cartels that are operating in Mexico and to the extent they operate in Texas, but also crack down on the Texas-based gangs that operate with those Mexican drug cartels. Seize their assets, put them out of business, put them behind bars. Go ahead.
Last month you sent a letter to a bunch of state agencies informing them about the fentanyl crisis and urging them to come up with solutions to decrease the deaths. What measures would you support outside of law enforcement? And I know you mentioned this campaign, so if you could speak more about like what that actually entails.
Sure. So different agencies would have different people that they would be in contact with. Let me give you several examples. The Texas Education Agency can play a primary role here by working to communicate with school officials, whether it be school law enforcement, school principals, school superintendents, and teachers. All of them need to be involved in this very same education process we're talking about here. They need to be on the front lines of communicating with the students and the kids and the parents of the kids. Separate from that, the Health and Human Services Commission and the State Department of Health Services, they have a role to play with the healthcare providers around the entire state of Texas, doing things such as making sure they do a better job of identifying fentanyl poisoning as opposed to some other type of overdose, but also to make sure they have Narcan available, as well as it providing information to their employees so that their employees can safeguard themselves from being exposed to fentanyl. That's just two examples.
Governor, you mentioned Narcan. I wondered, how would you increase the amount of Narcan? Where would the funding come from? Where would it go? You mentioned to officers. Where else would it go? To schools? And again, would it come from the state or federal funding?
Well, I propose this come from the state funding. There could be federal funding available for it also. But bottom line is, this is something we have to distribute across the state of Texas. It must go in part to law enforcement agencies. There have been many reports already about law enforcement officers who pull over a vehicle, they're going through a search operation, they expose themselves to fentanyl, and they have a very adverse reaction, and they need immediate access to Narcan. So that's one easy example. But also we may need to provide it in places like hospitals or schools or other settings where people may either come in with an overdose or expose themselves, or we will need to look for the areas where fentanyl is found most predominantly and make sure that Narcan is easily available to those areas.
Two more questions?
What about the fact that, are you teaching parents and kids that just not even taking it, but just exposure to it, touching it can lead to poison?
Yes, and that's part of the process, and that is, one pill can kill, but exposure to it, touching it, and then touching your face can be a deadly exposure also. And so the goal is to provide the full information that's needed to make sure that people are aware of these drugs that are on the street, how deadly they are, and what must be done for families to protect themselves from it.
Last question. Are you putting funding behind this right now, or are you saying that you're planning to in the next legislature?
So we're already putting some funding behind it, but we're looking to do something more comprehensive across the entire state of Texas to make sure that, first, things like Narcan will be more readily available, more widely available. Second, though, is that we pass these laws that I want to pass that makes this a murder crime, so that it will provide the tools that prosecutors need in order to effectively prosecute it. Then the third thing that we need to do legislatively is to reclassify it as opposed to an overdose as a poisoning. For one, that will help with regard to prosecution, but also it helps the families who have lost a loved one from it to make clear that their loved one did not die because of some overdose. They died because of some innocent poisoning that they were completely unaware of.